Good afternoon. My name is Katie Zarzycka, and I am the president of the National Guard Association of Connecticut. Thank you to co-chairs Representative Foster and Senator Honig, vice chairs Representative Delaney, Senator Lesser, ranking members Representative Anderson, Senator Gordon, members of this committee for holding this informational hearing. I am speaking here today on behalf of National Guard Association of Connecticut, which advocates for the Connecticut National Guard, its service members, and their families. I will start by speaking about the effects that the government shutdown has had on the Connecticut National Guard, as well as other issues that have arisen in recent years due to federal budget decisions. In the midst of the second longest government shutdown in U.S. history, the Connecticut National Guard is maintaining baseline daily operations to ensure those units designated for mobilization continue to build readiness, and those units in the state are ready to respond to serious emergencies that threaten life and public safety. However, continuing these baseline operations with no appropriation to purchase fuel, spare parts, and no guarantee of pay for our service members or full-time federal employees is a serious cause for concern. While most of our active duty and drilling members receive their military pay so far for the month of October, there is no guarantee that it will continue. In regard to compensation, our Title 32 dual status military technicians full-time support workforce is of particular concern. Dual status military technicians hold a distinctive place within federal service. They are federal civilian employees who must also maintain membership within the National Guard. They wear their military uniform throughout the civilian work week. In appearance and conduct, they are virtually indistinguishable from active duty personnel. The distinction lies in their legal status, pay, and benefits, which often fall short of those provided to their active duty counterparts. Despite performing some of the most essential work in our organization, they are among the lowest paid members, and now they are not being paid at all. Some of these workers have since been furloughed, putting their positions and potential back pay at risk. Aside from our dual status military technicians, the Connecticut National Guard currently has approximately 800 soldiers and airmen deployed overseas. Most of them were paid last month, but it is unlikely that they will receive their end-of-month paycheck. There are few situations that can bring more distress to a deployed service member than difficulty at home. I am sure that for many of them, missing even a single pay period has devastating consequences. I know that there is little that our state government can do to alleviate these challenges, but I think it's important for you to understand what these members are currently going through. It is important to note that the Connecticut National Guard has been struggling due to a stagnant federal budget well before the start of this current government shutdown. The Connecticut National Guard currently operates with approximately 50% of our validated full-time manning requirements. Training money has been continually flat, which is an effective reduction in the name of DoD capital investment into technological needs of the future. Vehicles sit in maintenance shops with no repair parts to repair them. Service members who volunteer for extra schools are then unable to train with their units due to limited funding. Hiring freezes for the active force within the Guard are frequent, making it difficult to hire the people who run the organization when the part-time force is away. These are not unique challenges to the Connecticut National Guard. They are being felt across the 54, but unlike with the government shutdown, there is places for Connecticut to step in. The state of Connecticut can continue to support the National Guard by fully funding Connecticut Military Department programs such as JEEP. The state can establish an emergency response fund for in-state operations that help fill gaps when federal funds are unavailable. Our guardsmen and women are more ready when they are financially secure. It is time for the state to expand education benefits for our service members and veterans pursuing traditional and non-traditional higher education. For example, we can eliminate the hidden fees that plague our tuition waiver recipients, expanding credentialing options, and creating a state GI Bill. These open multiple future opportunities for service members. The members of the Connecticut Guard are highly dedicated, but dedication alone is not enough to be ready for the next emergency. The National Guard needs the support of the legislature, the Connecticut Military Department, and the people of Connecticut so that we can continue to always be ready and always there. I'd like to address your question earlier, Representative Anderson, about the ID cards. So currently, our DEER's office in Middletown is open. So if people need to get in a military ID, whether they're retired or currently serving, they can. And then there's also, if for retirees, effective December 31st of 2025, their current ID cards will no longer be valid and they will not be able to receive services. So they were supposed to go to a local DEER's office and get the new Uniformed Services ID card. And it's an updated card with more security and stuff like that. So I believe that's what the issue is, because once that card, their current cards expire, then they will not be able to receive any kind of benefits. You're welcome. Any questions?
Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate your thorough presentation. I have a couple of questions for you, if you don't mind. The first, you know, a couple of times during public hearings, we've sort of mentioned the 998 dial 1. I always feel like that's sort of getting people at the last moment of emergent situations. Is there something that we should as a state be doing or considering to support our troops, especially when it comes to their mental health and associated health care?
Absolutely, a very passionate project of mine. So there are resources out there, but I think we need to be a little more preventive versus reactive. So currently, we do have a military support program which has embedded clinicians, where I believe we're the only state across the nation that has embedded clinicians within our units. I have personally used their services, and they are phenomenal. We would like to potentially add more appropriations to that program so that we can expand those services. One of the problems that a lot of active duty soldiers face, and anybody that has TRICARE in general, to become it's difficult for practitioners to become a TRICARE provider. Many times the process is very difficult, takes them 2 or 3 times to get it. So sometimes as the saying goes, effort isn't worth the squeeze. And then in addition, TRICARE reimbursement rates tend to be low. There was also a point earlier this year where TRICARE was behind in paying out reimbursements. So then that causes lapses in care. So that's part of the problem. So if there's a way that we could potentially provide more providers, specifically for long-term care, so if we did something similar to the troops to teachers program, if we were able to develop like a troops to therapist program within the state, I think that would increase the number of providers and help service members actually find providers that are willing and available to take them. Another thing is that we've set, how do I want to say this? We're not immune to suicide, obviously. We represent the population. So we've set the trend on, we have the models on how to do things. We just need to expand our models and potentially get additional funding to adopt other models that have worked across the state.
I appreciate you talking about that. I'll just say for the committee's knowledge that this is something we've discussed before, and we've put in requests for information to sort of get an understanding of best practices statewide on what we can be doing in the mental health space. And I know that that the military department is advancing programming, but there's more willingness. There is willingness, and it's about resources to make more work happen. And I
Absolutely.
do think that the troops to therapists, that sounds like a great model and idea. And I'd be interested to hear what people were saying in a public hearing when we get that bill on the agenda this upcoming session. You mentioned the emergency response fund. I would love if you could talk to me a little bit about how that is used, what it looks like right now, what that system is about, and I'm sure I'll have follow-up questions.
So currently, the way our process works, if the National Guard gets, we'll just use a hurricane as an example, and we decide to activate the National Guard for response. Currently, the state active duty funds to put service members on state active duty orders comes out of the Connecticut Military Department's operational funding that they have. And then they have to then request further funds from OPM to replace what they spent out of their operational dollars. So it's essentially, it works almost like an IOU for the state military department of like, hey, we spent our money that we had allocated for other things. Now we're going back to the state to try to get it back. It would be significantly easier if there could be a separate line item specifically for state active duty funding so that the state military department can just go straight to that pot of money and activate service members for state active duty and not have to worry about tapping into their operational funding, especially if there's a state emergency towards the end of the fiscal year where most of their appropriation has already been spent. And then that, would impact how many service members they can bring on duty to do that. So if there was a separate fund specifically for that, it would make the process significantly easier, more efficient, and give the military department more flexibility in who and how many people they can bring on state active duty orders to respond to a state emergency.
So it sounds like when there's an in-state mobilization effort, usually in response to an unanticipated emergency, then we have to talk about mobilizing money before we can determine how many people we can mobilize, and that delays the emergency response and then could potentially end up with unrecouped cost for the military department when they're already underfunded. Okay.
Yep.
Is there an amount that you think you're interested in seeing?
I do not have a specific dollar amount. I think we would be able to potentially look at the different emergency services functions that we support and what units would support them, and then look at, payroll costs for those functions. So that's something that we would have to come back to the table with.
I wonder if that's an OFA request we could consider, if that's okay, to look at what the last couple of it would be state active duty deployments were and what they cost, and sort of how much and where the money came from to fund that. That might help us better understand where we can go. Thank you so much for participating. I'm going to look for questions from other members of the committee. Rep. Anderson? No? Okay. All right. Seeing none. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate you.